everything?
Yeah.
Okay,
You up and
all
running?
right.
Good, thank you.
I'll go do the other one.
Alrighty. And I'll keep an eye on that then.
Okay, yeah, just stop it when you're done, it should.
Okay. Are they charged? I didn't even look.
Well, they're charged mostly, but don't have power plugged in.
Okay, because it's only gonna be about an hour and a half, but,
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they should be good then.
okay.
So, yeah, the kid's been working hard on this.
They have been. You know, for the most part, yeah.
This is a project it's a few months,
It's a 3-week for sure.
3 weeks.
Spend a week researching in my room, and then by the time they're done researching in my room, they got a presentation done. Then the English department goes through it with them at least once, if not twice. If the ones that need more work, they'll have to go through it 3 times.
Okay.
So,
And they pretty much fine-tuned the presentation then
yeah, yeah,
of it?
yeah. And Julie is really, really good about the speech side of things and debate and stuff like that. And so that's one reason we've been so successful, you know, when we've been doing this against Rock Valley. So,
Oh, okay. Okay.
it's not me, that's for sure.
Oh, stop it.
Hold that.
No.
Takes everybody,
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah.
You're only as good as the people around you is what I always
Yep,
say in
that's
business.
exactly
you know?
right. When you gotta leave again, Rob?
What's that?
When you leave again?
Well, I don't know. I went to Chicago here a couple weeks ago, and different world out there, a little more restricted in Illinois. The governor, you know, there's no sit down anywhere to eat
Right.
in that place. It's everything is carry out. And,
Yeah.
on the patios you can sit down, but of course it's getting a little cold for sitting at the
Yeah.
patio, you know.
And your food gets cold so quick.
Yeah. So I don't see anytime soon myself, you know, golly, I'm ready to get out there, you know, but, you know, because sooner or later you're really, at this point, the way I see it is my returning customers, you know, are what we're really relying on and
Right.
depending on.
Yeah.
The new customers, it's hard to acquire new customers when you can't go out there and look them in the face and
Right.
you know, because everything is really done through relationships, right? I mean, really,
Yeah.
that's to build those relationships, you really should be in front of them. And that's
Exactly.
it. The new customers I have. I guess we're fortunate enough that we're out there, you know, getting new customers for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, pretty aggressively. Marketing, you know, pretty aggressive, found some things that were successful on that front too.
Sure.
So, we're fortunate for that part. Fortunate that still, business has not slowed
Oh,
really
that's
too
good.
much.
Yeah.
We still have a pipeline through, geez, June of next year,
That's
for
good.
orders,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm optimistic by March, we'll see.
I would agree with you.
I have been optimistic, but I'm optimistic now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear the Moderna and
Yeah.
Pfizer and,
AstraZeneca yesterday.
Yeah.
oh, really, a new one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the British one. But then, one news source says it's 90% effective, and then another news source says it's 70% effective, so that's a discrepancy I've seen with that one.
That's a big
I'm in the Moderna trial, like I got.
You are?
I am, and,
So how'd you get into that?
I think I heard an ad on Spotify,
Okay.
and they, you know, they said there's very few women my age who aren't on any meds, and so they were excited to have me in the trial for anything,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
To conflict with.
yeah, to conflict with that. So, but then we got an email yesterday saying, even if you think you got the vaccine, live your life like you don't placebo. Because, and they only give like 10 vaccines to like 80 placebos. It's
Right.
it's really scary.
Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's something.
And they kind of explained you know, they're 95%. They said that number will change,
Right.
like more data.
Like go lower then, or?
They don't know, but they said
They
it will
don't-
change
okay.
as we keep analyzing data, so don't
Okay.
panic everything.
Yeah.
I better run around, keep around finding people.
Okay.
Kids. Your daughter's supposed to be here shortly, I would think.
She left early. She left way before I did.
Yeah, mine too. Boy,
So she was,
they were
She's up early, she was dressed, she was ready to go.
Oh, boy.
Yeah,
Speaking of the devil,
Yeah, I can hear you talking about.
you guys can shut up.
yeah. Here.
She got coming, she shut up, didn't she?
Yeah, okay, wait.
So you had a fun event this weekend, huh?
Yeah, that was
Exciting?
fun, yeah.
Nice.
Josie's little party there, we asked her how, what what she thought of it, and yeah, it was everything she wanted, so.
Good. So then when will she go? Will they start training early, or does she go
Boy,
normally?
I think right after she graduates, she goes there,
Okay,
depending on, I suppose, the virus
yeah,
and how far we are with that. I don't know that they'll bring her down early. Normally, they go there for the summer,
okay.
and train with them guys.
And when is the college season? I don't even know
become a
when
family.
the
So,
season is.
just like their season right now, it's usually January through May.
Okay,
Yeah. So, they, they'll get their arms wrapped around her as soon as they can, because of course they wanna bring them in, get them comfortable with their atmosphere, and
yeah.
keep an watchful
Oh, that's
eye on their
exciting.
training.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what she's wanted, so.
I know she looked at some other ones, but Iowa was the one, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Illinois was in the top running as
Okay.
well. But, yeah, she's just spent some time on the phone with Larissa, a lot of time, and, Larissa's the head coach for Iowa, and they have a pretty good relationship from the start. Larissa's came and watched her at a couple competitions, and pretty neat. That was when we knew things were serious, when she showed up and
Yeah.
was following Josie wherever Josie went. She was right there and videoing it, and then when Illinois, had us out there, we knew that one was serious, and Penn State, the worst way, wanted to see her.
Oh.
And of course, they were
Yeah.
a little late to the game, so by then, the virus was, and their dead period was, they had a dead period that they had to follow. So, which means they can't go see the athlete, and the athlete can't go see them.
Right,
So,
yeah. Shoot.
that was a bummer. They wanted her to commit to them without her even seeing the campus.
No.
And
That's
she's
a little
like, no, I can't
tricky.
do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, it was fun. She's relieved that now that business is over. She worked her tail off on that. I mean, she was calling every week and talking to coaches. That alone itself, just selling yourself and building relationships with multiple people that, you don't know. And
Mhm.
it was a great learning experience for her, because really it's about, she learned that she can go and sell herself and build relationships with people that she don't know for something that she wants, and,
Good, yeah.
not like, going out and get a job or
Right.
whatever, so.
Yeah.
There was a lot to learn out of it, for sure, the whole process.
No, that's great.
And Lydia, has she decided on
No,
anything?
she hasn't. No, she wants to play golf. So, we visited the places that had reached out to her, who've been
Oh.
interested in her, but we
Awesome.
haven't decided. It'll be a smaller, she's looking at Central, Mount Mercy, USF. We'll see. I keep telling her to go somewhere south.
Yeah.
She can play a little more golf,
Yeah.
but,
Right,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's look at.
well, Heather Winter, I know she played golf up at USF, in her college days.
Yeah, so we'll see.
She seemed to have-
It was hard not having a season last year, but,
Oh,
she
yeah.
did play quite a few summer tournaments in South Dakota, so she did get some
She got-
official scores posted,
Yeah.
It's tricky when you can't.
Oh, yeah,
Post
absolutely.
anything,
That's
yeah.
something to show your successes.
Yeah, so, we'll see.
Well, that's
My
fun.
other girl's
That's
been
good.
very slow in making their decisions, so let's I would love to have one that could keep us hanging till we we'll see. At least wrap this up by March, that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's certainly fun in any sense, but. Yeah, that was our first experience of all that business, and man. Oh, man. And your oldest is where now?
Well, she's at UNI, and she just finished her last semester classes. So she'll student teach next semester.
Okay.
But she's actually gonna come home. Hi.
Good morning.
She's gonna come home and, I think she's gonna do a long-term sub between Thanksgiving and Christmas at West Sioux.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And then she'll go back to Cedar Falls after Christmas
Okay, finish up.
to student teach over there.
Student teach?
Yeah.
Oh?
She's planning to student teach like abroad, but everything changes this year, so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. No doubt. And Marcy was telling me that she was abroad
Yeah.
a few times before, right?
Yeah, so, but she went this weekend, she was interviewing in Phoenix. She got a job offer in Phoenix to teach down there after. So I'm all for it, 'cause
Oh, yeah.
nice place to visit, easy to get to, go.
For sure.
You
Nice,
know?
nice, inexpensive Allegiant flights down there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
We'll see what she decides. I'm sure she'll tell us this weekend. And she's gonna home, so we'll see.
That's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Almost there to the
Yeah. That's good.
world of profession, huh?
Hello.
So, 8:15 is what the evening
That's
starts
what I
at.
thought so too.
8:30 is what this
8:30
is.
is the first one, okay. Let's see how good's it doing.
Guys all ready? Yeah? I thought it'd be festive. We're decorating for Christmas. Yesterday, and there were some so the masks were seasonal. Oh, 5 of them? Oh, we have no. I wear something that I can see with it and inject it.
Well, there are 2 degrees, and it's only 6 degrees. John just arrived.
No, we're waiting for Anna Lucy.
So we've got Luke here and John there.
No, I think they're together.
I know, I wish we would've had one. I was saying, need someone who actually knows the law. Well, good luck, ladies.
I don't know that it matters.
Tons of questions planned.
What do you-
Yeah, I told him you're gonna really.
I'm gonna drill them down.
Good,
Yeah.
How are you, Julie?
good, and you?
Good. So my kids feel they know you really well.
Okay.
We were looking for furniture this weekend, and Maggie goes, I just know Julie Bishop would like that chair.
Was it on this
She's like, I feel like I could walk out of the store and say the chair is Julie Bishop would like.
Well, I have to say, Julie Vischer would like some new chairs. We bought some furniture several years ago. Wow, it's showing there. It's not even that old. How did I like?
Ours is old, very much so.
I've got the Zoom link. Here we go.
supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
That's pretty awesome.
That dog got playing for Iowa, is that one of yours?
That would be my cousin Floyd.
Okay,
So, he's from West Line. So
okay.
his dad passed away of a heart attack when he was a freshman in high school.
Okay,
Kind of young, or younger.
yeah.
No, he was a good kid. He was a good kid. Hard worker.
I heard it.
Yeah, Monty. So, yeah. So, do you guys on break already, or is that?
No, normally we work through Wednesday, but this year we get tomorrow off. So, I'm coming here and I'm going to work to decorate and then I'm done.
First group, is it Nate?
No, it's Lydia, Gabby.
Good morning.
Good morning.
They're waiting out here.
Not till then.
Who's already joined the Zoom?
That's a lot. Morning, Amanda, how are you?
Good.
What? I guess. How exciting. That's the only time I
Get all about it.
all the power, right? It doesn't happen.
Okay, well, that's not what I wanted. I think that's what I wanted.
Streaming from the iPad, zooming from your second computer or man's computer.
So that's Zooming, what are they presenting from?
Your computer.
Okay.
Why? What do you mean? I got another computer of mine I can grab.
I'd rather use your computer then I can still use mine. You have a computer that's not doing anything this morning?
Yep.
Okay.
Have you done this before?
I've done those a lot, multiple times.
Okay.
I've never done the screen for it.
Well, it's a little different this year. I mean, usually it's more like film road, there's a number of categories.
Yeah, I know, I'm like.
And it's like hard when it's all
Yeah,
just one.
yeah.
Yeah.
So are each one of these questions, you know, that are stated here in the introduction of statements supporting the case by petitioner, 80 points, is it broke down, into like,
I think we're just supposed to do like.
Yeah,
four out of
typically
80.
it is more, but I think with the reconfiguration, it's just kind of one lump.
Yeah, 'cause we don't get two sides either.
I usually, comment on their delivery, like how well they speak and present, about their evidence, how well they do in Q&A, things I remark on.
Any questions at all?
No, I think that's the one.
I'm just making stuff up over here.
Okay.
But I was just asking like what to comment on, I was just saying some of the things I'd love to comment on.
Do we want to begin?
I'm ready, I'm ready.
Are we streaming, do you suppose?
I think that's,
Yeah, I think you were streaming.
It appears we are
I think that's.
online.
Do we need to wait for him?
I don't think he's coming.
Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Olson said not to worry about time, is that correct? Or do you want us
I have not heard that, but I'm okay with it.
do you want a time on here or don't you?
I don't want to.
Okay, okay,
I'm happy not to time.
okay.
Do you want, I don't know how we want to do this. Do you want the door closed?
Sure.
I don't think anyone's going to come in, but
This court is called to order and is now in session. We are gathered to hear arguments in the case of Florida versus Jardines here in the Supreme Court of the United States of America. Please begin.
Good morning, judges. I'm Lydia Graham, along with my colleagues, Caitlin Byer and Gabrielle Lee. We are here today as the petitioners representing Florida in the case of Florida v. Jardines.
On November 3, 2006, Detective Pedraja received a tip that the home of Joelis Jardines was being used to grow marijuana. On December 6, 2006, Detective Pedraja went to the home of Joelis Jardines. Detective Bartelt and his drug detection dog, Frankie, also arrived. Frankie was placed on a leash and began bracketing, which is where the dog goes back and forth to trace the source of drugs. Frankie detected the source of marijuana at the door, and then they returned to their car. Detective Pedraja then approached the door, smelled marijuana, and noticed mothballs outside, which are used to cover the smell of marijuana. Detective Pedraja then obtained a search warrant, conducted a search, and confirmed that marijuana was being grown.
So, the constitutional question at hand is, does a sniff by a trained narcotics detection dog at the front door of a home constitute a search within the rulings of the Fourth Amendment?
Well, what the Fourth Amendment states is that all people are protected from unreasonable searches and seizures by the government. However, they are not guaranteed protection from all searches and seizures, but only those that are deemed unreasonable under the law.
We would argue that there are two reasons that Florida did not violate the Fifth Amendment. One, a dog sniff is not a search, and two, evidence exposed on the curtilage, the public space on private property, is open to the public.
Let's take a look at a few cases proving our first point. A drug dog sniff is an objectively reasonable search, not invasive or intrusive.
The first case is United States v. Price, in which a drug dog sniff was used to alert authorities to narcotics inside the luggage or ribbon place. Keep in mind, this took place without a warrant and occurred based on suspicions of the traveler's behavior, as well as discrepancies in his luggage tag. It was unanimously decided in this case that a drug dog sniff does not constitute a search within the meanings of the Fourth Amendment.
Similarly, in the case of Illinois v. Cabales, a drug dog sniff was used on the car of Roy Cabales and detected marijuana. In this case, it was decided that police do not need reasonable suspicion to use a drug detection dog sniff on a car during a traffic stop. In both of the previous cases, it was determined that a drug dog sniff was not invasive or intrusive and therefore did not constitute a search.
In our third case, Minnesota v. Edstrom, the court addresses the issue of a drug dog sniff being used at the front door of a person's home without a search warrant. After receiving an anonymous tip, officers used a narcotics detection dog at the front door of Courtney Edstrom's apartment and detected the presence of methamphetamine. The court decided that the front door was permissible for this sniff as it was a common area for anyone entering the building, including law enforcement. The decision in this case proves that a drug dog sniff is not invasive or intrusive.
There are two laws that further prove that a drug dog sniff is not an invasive nor intrusive search. The law of trespass states that officers are allowed to gather information in open fields, even if they're privately owned. And secondly, the law of approach states that officers are allowed to approach a private property and collect evidence against the homeowner.
Officers have the right to obtain evidence through an objective search through the aforementioned laws and cases. They are also allowed to collect evidence as there is no reasonable expectation of privacy for things exposed to the public. Objects, activities, and statements exposed to the public, which includes on the curtilage, are not protected by the Fourth Amendment. The odors and mothballs on the exterior of Jardine's home prove that he carelessly allowed the public to see and smell what was within his house.
In United States v. Jones, the court decided that officers had probable cause to search vehicles they believed had contraband after detecting the scent of marijuana. In United States v. Ventresca, the scent of fermenting mash supported probable cause for a warrant. In United States v. Johnston, the court said, and I quote, "There is no reasonable expectation of privacy from drug agents with inquisitive nostrils."
These cases determine that smells emanating from vehicles, houses, and other personal items are reasonable suspicion for searches and warrants, therefore proving that the odors of mothballs and marijuana detected by Detective Pedraja have validity. A drug dog sniffing odors emanating from a home cannot implicate any legitimate privacy interest, therefore no violation of any reasonable expectation of privacy occurred.
Due to the dog sniff being an objective search and not an intrusive one, and not invading any privacy concerns as there can't be an expectation of privacy for items exposed to the public, we believe that the dog sniff did not constitute a search and therefore did not violate the Fourth Amendment. Because of this, we would ask you to find in favor of Florida in the case of Florida v. Jardines.
Thank you for your time this morning. Are there any questions we can answer for you?
Maybe you touched on this a little bit, so if you take a dog to a front door of a house, of someone who owns it, and the dog reacts, are you proposing that they are allowed in at that time?
No.
In this case, the Detective Bartelt and Frankie, the dog, they went up, they smelled marijuana, and they were on the porch for less than from them leaving their car to coming back was less than 2 minutes. Then they went back and they used the sniff from the narcotics detection dog to obtain a search warrant.
It was the probable cause for a search warrant.
Yes.
If they had a tip beforehand, why didn't they obtain a warrant before going on the porch?
So there is a month in between the time when they received the tip and when they went to search the house. There is no information provided what they did in that month of time. We would presume they maybe investigated it, or they just have too many tips in the state of Florida to handle it right away. So we think they need more probable cause to obtain a search warrant than just an anonymous tip.
Yes. To validate the tip.
So what you're saying, they're gonna validate the tip with the dogs?
And the mothballs detected and the odor of marijuana by the smell detected by the officer as well.
The drug dog sniff was only one of the pieces of evidence
That they found.
that used to support that.
Multiple suspicious activity things that they found that were also part of the probable cause for the search warrant.
Could you explain the idea of curtilage a little more, like what is intended to be private and their own property?
So curtilage is defined as the public space on private property. So like what you own, that's your private property. But anything that's open for the public to use, I guess, that is what's the public space on it. So like officers or anyone, like people selling anything or just your neighbors, they have the right to go on your porch and knock on your door. Like that's open to the public, but it is technically private property.
So is that limited to like knocking on the door, or can I just like go sit on Gabby's porch for a while?
The law of trespass and the law of approach specifically state that specifically officers have the right to approach a home to collect evidence against the homeowner if they respect spatial and temporal limits. So in this case, the officers, they respected those spatial and temporal limits.
It'd be no different than a mailman or a UPS driver bringing a package to your front door or placing it inside of your garage, which that's technically your private property, but they invade that space for their work.
So let's say the officer's on the porch and they hear something in the house, like they hear evidence of a drug deal being made or something. Would that evidence be allowed to be used? Does it matter if it's a smell, a sound, a sight? Does the sense affect the situation?
The things that they detected were all outside the house. Nothing in this case had to do with what they detected inside of the house. So I don't think we can answer that really.
But if they were able to hear it from the outside, it would be just another sense that they could use to gain information for the search warrant.
There's no reasonable expectation of privacy to that evidence.
I think one has to ask the question, is a drug dog a specialized tool that is outside the bounds of searching? For instance, I'm not sure that it's allowed to use heat-seeking surveillance on a house, or so obviously the drug dog is a specialized tool. Does that affect privacy rights?
In the case United States v. Kylo, the court decided that that specific case, thermal imaging device was used from above a home to detect the activity inside of the home, and the court deemed that that was unlawful. In this case, the dog is not classified as a device like a thermal imaging device, as it is. A dog is a dog, and it's been around for hundreds of years. And yes, we've used advancements to use them and utilize them. However, they are not like an electronic device that would be used to invade the home.
They're not a new technology.
The
It's been used before.
The thermal imaging was not allowed because it was a new technological device, and the dog isn't new, and it's not a technological device.
So can a police and a dog walk up and down the street, basically, and just knock on everyone's doors?
If they respect the limits, then they have the right to do that.
There is also a thing called knock and talk that police officers can use, which they can legally go up to a door, knock on it, and then collect evidence from the homeowner.
With or without the homeowner's consent.
And they do not need a search warrant to do that.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Are you gonna be in class? Who's in class? Oh, freshman. All right, so, wait, we have to go on the computer? I'm trying to set up. What is that? Let's put that. Like this? Oh, that's
the Zoom started, and if kids join it, it's gonna ding. So just prepare yourself.
Well, it said on here, it said something about sign out.
Yeah, it said something, Zoom popped up.
But that might not be for you.
Zoom in.
I don't think so, because I'm zooming on this computer.
Okay, yeah.
But just don't be distracted by the ding dong.
We'll try.
Okay.
Second right here, do you need a second? Okay. All right, this court is called to order and is now in session. We are gathered to hear arguments in the case of Texas versus Johnson here in the Supreme Court of the United States of America. You may begin.
Good morning. We are on the Texas side of the Texas versus Johnson. Here we're presenting. My name is Lucas Kramer. This is Dawson Nelson, Carter Horst, and Corey Knight. And then our introduction. So, a little background. Gregory Johnson was in front of the Dallas City Hall, and he burned a flag in front of it during the Reagan. He was mad about the Reagan administration. And then our argument is that laws burning the flag are, like, against burning it, are constitutional, and you shouldn't be allowed to burn flags. And the First Amendment basically says that there's freedom of press, assembly, petition, and then freedom of religion. And then our argument is that it's not, flag burning is not speech, but it's more of an action, so it shouldn't be as what it's put as.
Flag burning is not sorry. Flag burning is not constitutional. Okay. It's not constitutional. You should not be able to burn the flag. It is not saved by the First Amendment First Amendment is speech, not action and violence like that. He put people in danger, and also it was a pretty big fire around them, and yeah.
So in 1968, the federal court ruled on a case against the desecration of any U.S. flag, and they wanted to cut down on the numbers of flags burnt and the possible endangerment from flag burning. This happened after the Vietnam War protest in Central Park in 1968 again, and basically their law made it so that it's illegal for anyone to knowingly cast contempt upon any U.S. flag. But the next slide shows more information. Go back. So 18 U.S. Code subsection 700 kind of details more minute, like little details about what makes it illegal to do. So the desecration of the flag is, they're basically defining the laws in this U.S. Code. So it says, whoever knowingly mutilates, defaces, physically defiles, burns, maintains on the ground, or tramples upon the flag of the U.S. is eligible to be taxed, fined, or imprisoned for a year or both.
Some of our supporting cases would be Halter versus Nebraska. Halter was a brewing company that put the American flag on a beer can to use it for advertising purposes. In the court case, the Supreme Court ruled that it is illegal to use the American flag for advertising purposes. Then, in the case Chaplinsky versus New Hampshire, the Supreme Court ruled that it is not part of the First Amendment to use fighting words or inciting violence which is not free speech. Then in conclusion, with the evidence we have provided, we believe that states should have the ability to outlaw burning the American flag.
Have a question?
Sure.
So you had mentioned a lot about putting out beer cans and all that, so what happened to that? Because obviously we live in a world, like, they put American flag on everything now.
All I know is they had outlawed it at the time in Nebraska.
Just
so-
in Nebraska?
Yep.
Okay.
I believe now it's more regulated state-wide, not
Okay.
federal, so.
Gotcha. State of for sure.
Yeah, I see a lot of products that are manufactured in the United States, do use the flag for, made in America. And so this was, the evidence that you came up with was it just in Nebraska that we understand?
Yeah, this was.
Yeah, so we have to kind of, we can only use cases from before our case happened, so some of this stuff might be different now, but,
Okay.
yeah.
There's a lot of American flags on logos and stuff now.
So is there any time it's appropriate to burn the American flag? I was taught you were supposed to burn the American flag if
If
it was
it's
defiled and
like tattered or torn
Yeah.
or something
Yeah.
like
But you
that.
have to
Out
do
of
it in a
respect.
reliable way.
We're more talking about like
You grab the flag.
people using it as a symbol for their movement or something. And
Right.
Once you pair that with words or fighting words, then we're saying it's not constitutional.
But I guess my question on that is that there's cases where it's right to burn it, but in this case it's not. Does that not mean that it is symbolic speech because you're making a point by burning it? You're not burning it to retire it, you're burning it in order to make a point, which would be speech.
Yes.
So do you see that, what I'm saying
Yeah,
there? Like,
yeah, I
how
see
would
what
you
you're
answer
saying.
that? How is that not speech?
Because in many cases, if it comes down to you having to burn the flag, you have overlooked many of the other options of speech when it comes to protesting.
Like, there's no reason to burn the flag.
Yeah,
You
there's
just
no
speak
reason
your
you have to
mind,
jump
don't
all the
light
way.
the flag on fire.
No, you
People
didn't.
fight for our country and everything.
But don't we do a lot of actions to make a point? You know, like,
He stole a flag from City Hall off the street and went inside and burned it in front of everybody to make them watch.
And that could also put people in danger. Burning a flag
In a building.
on fire.
so it's certainly theft.
Yeah, and everything.
And with the subsection 700, he maintained it on the floor while it was burning, also or ground. So according to that, it should also be illegal that way.
It's
Also.
also on government building.
I see why we would put limitations on speech for safety reasons, like the not yelling fire in a crowded theater, but I'm a little more confused on why we put limitations on speech when it is a form of protest or symbolism.
Well, it's not speech. Speech
Well, you
is
can have
what you
people-
talk, that was action, is what we're fighting. He was not speaking at all, he was doing what he wanted to show you what he wanted to do, what he was trying to say. It wasn't, it was action, it wasn't speech.
It was more than that.
Yeah.
But haven't other actions been considered speech, like the classic case of wearing a black armband to protest the Vietnam War?
That's
like
not
that?
violent though.
Yeah.
That's what?
That's not violent. Nobody could have been
He's
harmed.
just wearing
Well, burning something isn't necessarily violent. It's-
Well,
I mean,
it's
it
bullshit,
is.
but-
I mean,
It is.
It could be.
Burn
if you can
somebody.
be harmed by a fire, you can't be harmed by a black armband.
Unless people get mad.
Are we maybe more offensive than, can't think of what the word I'm thinking.
So you're building your case on the potential to harm others
A little bit,
Part
yes.
of it, yeah.
in burning flag in public spaces? Your thoughts on private?
Well, you gotta do it in a certain way. I mean,
But what if they don't want to, certainly?
it should be legal.
You don't prove that
have
If-
the,
Legion.
yeah, for
The,
them
The
to,
Legion have flag
Right.
donation programs where they go and respectfully retire flags.
that's respectful, not what he did was,
Is it legal to burn other symbols that are important to people? Is it legal, for instance, to burn a Bible in a public space, or a Quran, or a Torah, or is that, would those things be considered legal?
I believe yes. That it is.
it's a symbol of unity and togetherness, the flag is, so I'm
Flags.
sure those other ones probably fall close to that.
And what about other symbols of America?
What other ones are you talking?
You're talking about like,
Yeah,
they came out with that law against poaching bald eagles, right? And something like that, right?
Yeah, what if you,
that's a fine too, that's.
during the playing of the Star Spangled Banner, I stood up and just started yelling? Like, would that be
That-
okay?
That would be free speech, that's,
That's free speech, that's coming out your mouth, you're not
yeah.
doing an action to offend people and to put people in harm and danger.
It can irritate people, but it's not.
Yeah, but speech isn't just mouth, because like you did the beer
Well,
can,
that's-
the symbol on a beer can is a form of speech. And that's not coming out of your mouth. Right, so speech isn't just what we speak.
Yeah, the
Action.
First Amendment also supports symbolic speech, yeah. But technically under the code, the US code, it's saying that you cannot burn or defile a US flag.
Any more questions?
Good?
Okay.
Good,
All right, thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna talk about it.
Oh.
Resuming with April.
Yeah, I got it, okay.
Okay, then the change of plans with Nate and Araceli too. I sent those emails last night.
Yeah,
So-
Nate is in, right?
Yeah, and then Araceli will also have to.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Okay.
Other than that, then I think you're done,
We're
I
gonna
think.
double zoom.
Yeah.
Good morning, April. I cannot hear you. Do you have your sound on?
You guys are up. I already talked to her about it.
Or maybe I have to unmute. I haven't unmuted. Maybe I have to turn up my sound now. There you go. Now I'm hearing you. Okay. Your presentation is in here. Oh, where are you? Here's. Yeah. Right, that's so fun. Present. Should be somewhere. Clicker. You need a clicker. Who's clicking? April, it's gonna be awkward for you, but I'm gonna have you stand a little closer. Otherwise, these people can't see your face at all. So, here she is.
Hi, April.
Hello. And we'll hope this goes swimmingly.
All right, the court is called to order and is now in session. We are gathered to hear arguments in the case of EEOC versus Abercrombie and Fitch, here in the Supreme Court of the United States of America. You may begin.
All right, good morning, members of the court. I'm Brian Harskamp. My partners are Carlos Cordova and April Loney. And as representatives of Samantha Eloff in the case EEOC versus Abercrombie and Fitch, we intend to prove that when Abercrombie refused to hire Samantha Eloff for wearing a religious headscarf, they acted in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and the court should overturn the ruling of the lower court.
Title VII, as amended, protects employees and job applicants from employment discrimination based on race, color, sex, religion, and national origin.
EEOC versus Abercrombie. Abercrombie has a legal policy which prohibits its employees from wearing certain clothing. Samantha Eloff, a practicing Muslim, wore a headscarf during an interview at an Abercrombie store. During the interview, the manager did not mention her headscarf. She contacted her head manager and was told to lower her rating on the appearance section, which prevented her from being hired.
So when Abercrombie refused to hire her, they acted in violation of Title VII, and the following case precedents reaffirm our position.
First case, EEOC versus Kentucky Convention of the Cup Partners shows that refusing to hire people based on their religious practices violates Title VII. 4 female Muslims were denied employment at the Louisville Marriott downtown because they refused to take on bigger jobs at request of White Lodging Services Corporation. White Lodging Services Corporation lost and denied wrongdoing, but they accepted it to pay each complainant $10,000 for a total of $40,000.
Our second case, Ritchie versus Seminole, shows that refusing to promote or hire someone because it would promote a disproportionate number of white candidates in comparison to minority candidates violates Title VII. White candidates from the New Haven, Connecticut Fire Department sued city officials when the CSB failed to certify 2 examinations needed for promotion to lieutenant and captain. The CSB did not certify these exams because the results would have resulted in a disproportionate number of white candidates in comparison to minority candidates. The case ruled in favor of Ritchie 5-4.
Our final case, Onkel versus Sundowner, shows that while Title VII does not prohibit all physical or verbal harassment in the workplace, it does prohibit all forms of discrimination. Joseph Onkel filed a complaint against his employer, alleging that he was sexually harassed by his co-workers in violation of Title VII. The court ruled unanimously in favor of Onkel. In conclusion, people should never have to choose between their job and their religion, or be forced to accept any type of discrimination from their coworkers or their employer. It's unconstitutional to discriminate against other people's religious beliefs or violate any of their rights. Any questions?
So Title VII, what it actually protects is the I guess, presentation of a person presenting their religion.
Yeah, so like anything like religious practices, so like their jobs, or like if they have to miss work or something to like go to church and do a religious practice, then that's allowed. It protects that.
So can you explain the case a little bit more? So was, I can't remember her name,
Samantha Eloff, yeah.
So she wore her headscarf to the interview and then she was not hired, or she was hired and then disciplined?
She wasn't hired. They have this look policy, so then they have certain things you can't wear, so that involves like hats or like black shirts or something. And then because she was wearing a headscarf, they lowered her appearance rating, and then that prevented her from being hired.
Does it apply, like, were there other things that would have docked you, like if you're wearing a cross necklace or a?
Yeah, like they didn't allow like black
Any symbols
flags.
of religionism, any symbols of religion would have?
I'm not 100% sure, but I know that you weren't allowed to wear like black caps or black shirts I read that, but I didn't find anything about like necklaces or anything.
And does it matter at all that Abercrombie and Fitch is a private business? Like, does a private business have the right to make their own rules? I mean, it's not like they're working for a public school or a public library, but it is a privately held business.
It still protects everyone, like no matter what, if it's public or private.
Even if the business has a policy against it?
Yeah, like it still protects religious practices and all that.
So you said that there's an appearance checklist.
Look policy, yeah.
Policy. So are they being discriminated on other parts of their looks as well?
Most likely, yes.
Is that allowed?
No.
Any other questions?
I'm good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, nice presentation, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, April. You can go back in your comment close now. All right. I'm gonna let you just leave, and I'm gonna keep the Zoom going.
The court is called to order and is now in session. We are gathered to hear arguments in the case of Keto versus New London here in the Supreme Court of the United States of America. You may begin.
Good morning, members of the court. My name is Josie Bergstrom, and along with my partners Dayton Brunsting and Brody Wilbur, as representatives of New London in the case Kelo v. New London, we intend to prove that New London did not violate the Fifth Amendment's taking clause when taking land from Kelo and fellow citizens, and the court shall uphold the lower court's ruling. Does the city of New London violate the Fifth Amendment's taking clause when taking land from private owners to sell to private developers in the hopes the development will help the city's bad economy? New London was in a poor and economically distressed state. In 1996, the U.S. Navy closed its undersea warfare center, leaving 1,500 people without jobs. The tax base and population was decreasing, and the city was in desperate need of money-making opportunities, economic development, and employment rates to rise. In the Fort Trumbull neighborhood, it was characterized with a high vacancy rate in non-residential buildings, old buildings in poor shape, and less than half of the residential properties were in average or better condition. In 1998, Pfizer made plans to build a pharmaceutical research company. The city used the Fifth Amendment's taking clause to take land in the Fort Trumbull neighborhood from Kelo and fellow citizens to sell to Pfizer to meet public need and serve a public purpose. The Fifth Amendment's taking clause states authority has the right to take private property for public growth. The city did not take land to benefit the private entity, but rather to follow an economic plan for development. The Fifth Amendment's taking clause does not require literal public use, but a more broad and natural interpretation as public use as public purpose. When New London took property from Kelo and fellow citizens to benefit the economy in New London, they did not violate the Fifth Amendment's taking clause.
The issue of eminent domain has been brought before the court before. In 1981, Detroit was in a very distraught time with very low income tax being brought in and had a very high unemployment rate. General Motors was a manufacturing plant here and was on the brink of closing. As a last-minute effort, they went to the city officials to see if they would be able to find a new area to build a new plant, so that way they could try and lower the unemployment rate and raise taxes being brought in. The city then found an area in the Poletown neighborhood that they would be able to use and use eminent domain to be able to acquire this land. The Poletown neighborhood then took them to court, and the city of Detroit won. This helps set precedent that eminent domain may be used for a private entity if it is going to help better serve the public.
Another case with similar benefits and results to Kilo v. New London is the Hawaii Housing Authority v. Midkiff. In Oahu, Hawaii, there was an oligopoly where there is a high concentration or too much control of something. 72.5% of the land in Oahu was owned by 22 owners, mainly being the Bishop Estate, which are trustees of the previous Hawaiian monarchy. The land availability continued to decrease and was scarce. The rent and the price of the properties continued to increase because the Bishop Estate had full control over this. There was no economic development allowed on the properties, so there was no economic revenue being taken in. This caused a market failure where the Bishop Estate was simply the only party benefiting while others were hurting. The Supreme Court ruled in an 8-0 decision stating that taking land from the private owners, the Bishop Estate, corrected the market failure while providing housing opportunity and allowing economic revenue by allowing the properties to be developed for businesses and restaurants. Like Kilo v. New London, taking private property and selling back to private owners with economical benefits is public benefit and public growth, which is public use.
Another case that relates directly to our case is the Berman v. Parker. In this, the District of Columbia had a very struggling neighborhood. This brought DC officials to pass the Redevelopment Act. This gave them the power and opportunity to use eminent domain over some areas to give to other private businesses to try and help their economy. Berman owned a department store in this affected area and brought them to court. Parker then won this unanimously, which then set precedent that eminent domain is not just used for public users, but can be used through a private entity to help better serve the public.
The Fifth Amendment's taking clause allows the government to take private land for public use. Where there is public benefit, there is public use. Increasing tax revenue, creating jobs, and building up the local economy are a few situations where public benefit is public use. Knowing this, we ask you find in favor of the City of New London where eminent domain results in evident public use. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, so in the New London case, can you explain exactly what you mean by takings? Were people compensated for their
Yes.
properties, and were they fairly compensated?
They were fairly compensated, and not just that, but most people actually sold their land to the city right away up front, that eminent domain was not needed to be used. And then when they needed, basically it was, I wouldn't say stubborn people, but people that were like, we're not gonna give up our land, they were then paid for it up front and then had a court order saying that the land was now theirs, basically.
So you're talking about the people that are being difficult, or then people asking more than what their value
That was more
was
of a,
actually
it was more of a,
appraised at?
it was more of a, basically,
Simply they didn't want to give it
they
up.
basically, yeah, they just didn't want to give up. Basically, this is my house, this is our land, we're not gonna give it up, no matter what you guys say. And then,
Then they had to use eminent domain to take it.
And then were they
They were.
compensated at the same amount?
Mhm.
Or
Everyone was.
more, or was everybody compensated?
everybody was compensated, with their own, the property value. Every property value was, obviously has its own differences based on how good or in shape something is, how much it has, what they all have in it.
Yeah, legally eminent domain cannot be used unless there's just compensation. Basically, they're paid what's fair, if not more.
So my question was, how far do some of these private companies go to get this land? Are they really helping cities if they're paying twice the amount for a property? And then they have to resell that and make money somehow?
Yeah.
I mean, is there any kind of guidances or policy to make sure that whatever compensation is being exchanged is fair?
Yeah, I see where you're coming with that. We're like, if they're starting to pay more for the properties than what they're worth, like, is it really economically smart for them? But in this case, I guess I never heard of like the prices outdoing the plan that the city had.
Okay.
So I would say no, I think.
And for eminent domain to work, there basically has to be time to go with it. We realize that the results aren't gonna be there right away. We're not gonna see the economic boom right away. But through using this, through Pfizer getting this land, being able to bring in more people over the years, we expect them to be able to help this economy grow.
But is it all speculation then? I mean, can you guarantee that the community benefits from a company coming in? And that benefit is actually affecting those people and not just the company?
Yeah, well, what they do, it's actually, there's a lot more math that goes into it than I think what meets the eye, because when we say struggling neighborhoods and we say like poor or very high unemployment rate, there's a lot of numbers that go into that. So when we see where our tax dollars are going and they see like this neighborhood is really struggling, how can we help? They go through many different algorithms. They go through what would help, what areas would be the best, why this neighborhood, like basically routes that would help. So it's not just going to be in the middle of nowhere, but where people could also access it. There's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into it. And so can we guarantee that it's going to work? No, we can't guarantee anything. There's always probability that something can fail, that something could go wrong, that someone abuses power. There's always different aspects that can go into something not working. But mathematically, this would be our best case scenario. This would be our highest probability of getting this neighborhood back on track and getting these people back in the lives that they would want to have.
So maybe some of the things that you guys were talking about here in the past in your presentation, you may have went over this, but some of the benefits of bringing a company in here like that to improve the economy of the community are what are a few of those examples?
Increasing jobs
Yeah,
is a main
there's
one.
jobs, taxes,
Yeah.
obviously being brought in.
Yeah, from the state, from the government. Just money overall is the biggest part in this. It's basically this neighborhood is struggling with money and we're gonna try and do something to bring it in money. Money is like the driving force in this. So it's gonna give people money, it's gonna give the city money, it's gonna hopefully bring in the state more money with people wanting to move there from other states. Money's the really driving force in this.
Improve the property values,
Yeah.
improve some of the neighborhoods,
Living
living
areas.
conditions and presentation.
The idea of holding private property is a pretty solid and foundational, I guess, belief of what America is, right? This idea of owning your own, having your own private property. Does the idea that the state can come in and pretty much just take anyone's property, as long as they're justified, they have a case, but does it concern you?
I mean, yes,
It should be concerning.
It is
In some cases.
concerning, which is why court cases like this, Poletown neighborhood versus Detroit, with Midkiff, why all these cases are being brought up is because they are concerned. But then what gets brought up in all these cases are how, like I was talking about earlier, all the numbers that went into it, all of the data points, all of why they're doing this is when they all get brought up. So, I mean, there are times when eminent domain is being tried to use improperly, where they're trying to take land that doesn't need to be taken, or that they're trying to abuse what they're doing with it. And this is how we see the flip side of eminent domain and why it isn't always the best thing.
Yeah, I think sometimes eminent domain isn't really justified, but I think the city of New London made sure it's justified in the fact like they had their economic plan and what they wanted to do, what they wanted to see in the future, and Pfizer being a part of that, I think it's fair to say that they justified why they were doing it and where they were headed with it.
So if I'm not mistaken, Pfizer is not an American company, I believe they're German. Is that a concern at all, that this somehow benefits other countries and their companies?
I think it can actually help our relations with other countries, in a sense. I mean, of course, we really like American-made things, we like American companies, we like all this. But as we look around the world, there's always rising tensions. I mean, we look at us in Russia, we look at us and other people. So if this is a German company and we're able to help them out and be allies with them, I can see where there is a struggle, where it is an opposite country. But I think it can also.
Is your concern in selling private individuals' American land to a
Yeah.
German company?
Yeah.
You know?
So I guess, is it fair to say that, is it wrong to let a foreign company improve American soil and American people and help benefit American people, I guess, in the same token? I don't know, you can see it both ways, I think.
Because they're bringing in the company, but they're also not bringing in the workers. So they're still hiring American workers, they're still, bringing in the tax revenue for America. Some of the other benefits might go back to German, but over.
So you mentioned that this New Holland land was owned by the Bishop Estate. Is it in, what's happening on
That's,
that?
the Bishop Estate is actually, like, they're trustees of the Hawaiian monarchy, so they're basically a group of people that take care of the huge portion of land in just Oahu, Hawaii, and they had way too much control, and the government knew that. They broke that up, and they leased the land to people, so the renter, like, land's scarce in Hawaii no matter what, obviously, it's small, but in Oahu, they had too much control over it, and the people that were renting the housing and the properties couldn't afford it anymore, because the Bishop Estate continued to increase it because they thought they could. And yeah, eventually it became too much, and
All right, I forgot,
they
so
didn't
that
give
one
people
was
a chance.
Hawaii, right?
Right, so that, yeah, that's just
What about
background
the
support.
one in New London? Like, is there houses there? What's habited on this land that you're,
That we're taking?
yeah?
It's very low-kept houses, very impoverished areas.
Pretty
The
bleak.
non-residential buildings were basically vacant. The old buildings were in very poor shape, not taken care of, and less than half of the housing was in average or better condition in the area.
So there's a good chance most of these people didn't own these properties?
Yes.
Or they did own them?
No,
They
I was
did-
agreeing with you.
They were renting them?
They were.
So was something done, or will something be done to make sure all those residents have a new residence?
Mhm.
Because
That's the
you're gonna
just
put them on
compensation.
home.
That's where our
Right.
compensation comes in.
Okay,
Try and
but you
help
aren't
them
going
with
to
that.
make any arrangements for them or
No.
anything to.
I don't think there was any plan of saying, hey, we're gonna take your house, but then we're gonna give you the offer of this house 3 blocks away, or something like that.
What is the housing situation like in New London? What's the population, I mean, is it easy accessible? Is it going to be hard for these people to find housing on their own once do they have to leave the town?
I guess we never looked into where they would possibly be going
Okay.
after that, but.
It's a great question.
After I said it, I thought, I don't think Pfizer is German, and it's not, I'm sorry, but thanks for answering my question.
I thought I learned something new today.
After I said, I'm like, now that I say it, I think it was, but anyway, I did look that, sorry about that. Good job.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is going to be interesting, because it would appear we've got one person here and 2 people zooming.
How we doing here?
All right, Nate, are you with me? I can. Araceli, are you with me? Whoops, I just muted you, I'm sorry. Okay, Araceli, are you with me now?
Yeah.
All right, your group is coming in, and so I'll need you to look at the desk.
What are you thinking?
That's good. I just want to make sure I was doing justice. You guys are working hard on this, so obviously they're very well prepared.
Is this the first time you've done a spring
Yeah.
Person. Okay, so I'm
Well, now
gonna
that you
switch.
got your feet wet,
So
come back to your.
So Araceli, you're talking.
Sounds
Dave,
good.
will you talk a minute?
Yes.
Okay, so what's gonna happen is I've set the Zoom, so it's going to switch screens based on who's talking. And I'm gonna put you guys here. I'll let you get set up. charge of the clicker, obviously.
How you doing, Nate?
I'm doing pretty great.
Feeling okay yet?
What was that?
Feeling okay?
Yeah, I'm getting through it.
Good. Alrighty, it's all yours, Reed.
Good morning, members of the court. My name is Reed. My two companions are on the computer, named Araceli. We're going to be representing Carpenter and Carpenter versus U.S.
In April 2011, police arrested 4 men in connection with a series of armed robberies. One of the robbers, confessed to the FBI about the robberies and gave this guy his cell phone number. The FBI took all his records and tracked his data without a warrant. And the question is, does a warrantless search and a seizure of phone records and movements of the cell phone violate the Fourth Amendment?
The government violated Carpenter's right under the Fourth Amendment. While the government had permission and reason to go through one man's phone, they didn't have permission to go through all their phones. The majority, the Fourth Amendment protects not only the property interest, but mostly privacy.
Basically, what is the Fourth Amendment? The Fourth Amendment is basically you can't search through people's stuff or go in their houses without a warrant or their permission.
One of the cases that kind of represented our case was Weeks versus U.S. The first supporting case in this Weeks versus U.S., police entered the home of Fremont Weeks and seized papers which used to conflict him of transporting lottery tickets through the mail. This was done without a search warrant, and the court decided to seize the items of Weeks' residence, which directly violated his constitutional rights.
Our second supporting case is Sanford versus Reading. Savannah Reading was an 8th grader at Sanford Middle School, was strip searched by the school office. Ms. Reading filed a suit against Sanford. Fourth Amendment rights to be free of unreasonable search was violated, and Reddy was won for the case of 8.1.
Riley versus California case. This case was basically as similar as our case is. Riley was driving with expired tag and expired license, so the police pulled him over and brought him in to be questioned because he was part of a gang. So they took his phone without questioning him or without asking him about it or had a warrant. And this was violating his Fourth Amendment because this is his phone, and he can't. They're not supposed to have his phone without a warrant or his consent.
The key points of this presentation: they didn't really have a direct search warrant for Carpenter, as there was no reasoning. Our search Carpenter's phone and unconstitutional with the Fourth Amendment. And we would like the courts to overturn their lower court's ruling and see this was unconstitutional because of the Fourth Amendment.
So did they ever touch Carpenter's phone?
Yes.
Or did they touch the data on his phone?
They touched his phone.
How did they get his phone? I thought
There
that,
was 4 men. He was one of the 4 men.
right, and the other guy, the one guy gave the numbers, but did he give him the phone? phones?
They said they had probable search for that without a warrant, so they could use his data, location, and then they got his phone to look through his messages and get pictures and all that.
So it was probable cause.
Can you go back to the first time, just explain the case
Yeah.
again? I'm a little confused on that.
And thank you for defining the Fourth Amendment.
Yes.
Thank you.
So on this, it looks to me like it's just records and data, but not the actual phone. According, by this slide. Is that correct, or?
Yeah, I'll say so.
So,
It's just the record.
does that make a difference to you if it's an object versus data?
Yeah, yeah, it might be.
And
It's,
then,
your personal information, so they should be tracking it without a Fourth Amendment, without a search warrant or probable cause by the courts.
well, I guess my next question is, who owns that data? Do I own my data, or does Verizon own my data? Like, who owns my?
Well, Verizon owns your data, but I believe you signed a contract with Verizon saying that they can't look through your data, and nobody else can without your consent or a probable search warrant.
So there's a difference between probable cause and probable search warrant.
Yes.
So in this case, there was probable cause because this one person
Yeah, this one person.
ratted out the rest of them basically and gave them all the numbers.
Yeah.
So there was very probable cause for the FBI to look into the records.
Yes.
Did they ever come after the phones? Or did they ever obtain a firm search warrant after they realized they wanted to use the information for it?
They did not get the warrant, but they did have the data from the phone records, probably not from the phones.
The first court said they didn't have to have a warrant to search through his phone.
So you're trying to overturn the fact that they should have had a warrant instead of just use probable cause?
So the probable cause gave them the ability to go get the records and search the phone's locations, things of that nature,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
And there was no warrant.
No, there's no warrant.
Do you know the law on probable cause?
No, I do not.
No.
I have no other questions.
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right, you guys can go.
Hey, hey,
Oh, sorry.
you're still my people.
Sorry.
Yeah, you guys can leave the meeting.
You might need this too.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, folks.
That's a scary one right there. That's a scary situation right there.
It really makes you realize how anything on this little
Ah.
device is not really mine.
Right?
Yeah, and you're gonna see
Oh,
another one of those on
Yeah.
cell phone data too.
Yeah.
Who's the click for? When it comes up, just test a little bit.
Good morning, members of the court.
Hold on just a second. Yep.
called to order and is now in session. We are gathered to hear arguments in the case of Wyoming versus Herrera here in the Supreme Court of the United States. You may begin.
Morning, members of the court. My name is Jordan. Along with my friend Blake and Joe, we are representing Herrera in the case of Herrera v. Wyoming.
Alright, facts of the case. Calvin Herrera was track hunting and tracked and killed elk on Bighorn National Park with two members of the tribe. He was tried and he was brought to court for illegally killing elk on national park grounds. In his arguments, he used that 1868 treaty, which gave him the right to hunt and kill elk on that land.
In 1868, the Crow tribe ceded land, which is now known as Montana and part of Wyoming, to the U.S. government. Within these lands, the Bighorn National Forest was contained, and in return, or in exchange for this, the Indians received hunting and fishing rights on unoccupied lands.
So the question at hand is, was the 1868 treaty broken when Wyoming became a state? And we believe that our evidence shows that the treaty rights are still valid.
Supporting cases, Minnesota versus Mille Lacs Band of Chippewa Indians, and Antone versus Washington.
Minnesota versus Mille Lacs Indians. They ceded land to the state for hunting and fishing rights. And then in 1850, President Taylor signed an executive order that removed them from this land and took away all their fishing and hunting rights. And then they sued the state for seeking judgment, saying that their rights were not broken and that the state stay out of their rights. And then the district court ruled that the Mille Lacs Indians kept the right to hunt and fish on that land. And they kept the right under the 1837 treaty. And Court of Appeals affirmed, and the court rejected arguments on the 1850 executive order.
In the case of Antone v. Washington, they ruled several things, three things. The first was that treaties must be constructed in favor of the Native Americans. And the second thing that they ruled is pointing towards our favor is that state and wildlife game officials can regulate non-Native American hunters that are hunting within the ceded lands, but they are not allowed to regulate Native Americans that are hunting within the ceded lands.
Conclusion, Herrera was within his rights when he claimed it out within Bighorn National Forest, National Park. So the treaty rights were still valid after Wyoming joined the Union, and the lands of Bighorn National Park did not become categorically occupied when it became a national park.
Any question?
So what's the purpose of the hunting regulations?
As far as towards Native Americans or towards?
Just in general.
So you aren't overkilling populations of animals?
So it's not about safety at all and other people on the land, it's really just about overpopulation.
Well, hunting regulations are things like, in Iowa, an example would be, right, we can only shoot 3 rooster pheasants a day, stuff like that is what they're looking at. And you
So
have
there's regulations for the public, right?
Yep.
And Herrera was the Indian.
Yep, he's a member of the program.
And he is given privileges to hunt anywhere.
On the unoccupied lands that they ceded to the U.S. government. And within that land was the Bighorn National Forest.
Okay, so that was in the agreement.
Yep, in the treaty they are given hunting and fishing rights upon unoccupied ceded lands. And our evidence shows that the lands of the national forest did not become occupied when it became a national park.
It doesn't become occupied as national park because it's a national park.
No one's living there, so it's not occupied.
Is there tourists, is there,
Tourists, but,
should they block those areas off? Or-
it's not known, but actually, there's special, for non-Native American hunters, there's special permits so they can go into a national park and hunt.
Okay.
So it's like hunting any other forest.
Can you also go back to those three things that they,
In that, in Farmview, Washington.
maybe the one before that? I thought you said there was three things that they had to follow.
In Farmview, Washington, they made 3 rulings. One
Yeah.
was that they had to be, treaties, when the US government was making, they have to be constructed in, towards like the Indian benefit. They
Okay.
need to benefit from the treaties. And the second is that, state game officials can regulate non-Native American hunters in the ceded lands, but they cannot, regulate Native Americans, so they can't, they can't give them tickets technically for breaking laws that, the other people have to follow.
So basically, in this case, the Native Americans didn't have any rules they had to follow.
Yeah, they don't have they have no need for season dates, so, and they don't need a tag to claim it up, so.
So, in Herrera versus, or Wyoming versus Herrera, the district court ruled in favor of Wyoming?
The district court did.
Yes.
Yep.
And so you're bringing it to the Supreme Court to try to overturn
Yep.
their ruling, okay?
So is there any discussion about how you prove your ethnicity? And does that have other implications that could be dangerous?
You're kind of exploring. that,
Like,
what do you mean by that?
okay, so if a certain set of rules does not apply to a population, the Crow Creek tribe, or the Crow, is it the Crow tribe?
The Crow tribe.
The Crow tribe. Then how do you prove you're a member of that Crow tribe? And then thinking a step beyond that, are there any implications to having proved your ethnicity?
So you're asking how he proves that he's part of the Crow tribe?
Right.
I'm not exactly sure, but in the documents, he's an enrolled member of the Crow tribe, so I would assume somewhere in there, there's a blood relation to someone that is connected to the original Crow tribe, and as well as documentation that says he's a member of the Crow tribe, and he was residing on the reservation, the Crow reservation. Does that answer your question? Is there more? I can finish.
No, I guess, is it something that the court should be concerned about? How, obviously, there's examples from our past where it's been dangerous to have to state what your ethnicity is, and I'm just wondering if that is
I don't think
a
it is.
concern of the courts, that the court should be concerned about.
I don't think it would be.
So, why did the district court choose to side with Wyoming? What was their order in choosing that side, do you know?
The district court ruled with, Ward v. Racehorse. In
Not in this Wyoming versus Herrera.
they didn't rule with the no wax, and the Supreme Court, we would like you to rule with no
Right,
wax.
okay. So. No, I don't have a question.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes,
for our group, you're gonna need a Zoom call, Michael.
I have already sent the link, and so I'm waiting for him to join. So if you are in contact with him, tell him that the email went out about 7:45 this morning, and that he just needs to join at any time.
Okay.
Are you texting and calling him or anything like
Oh,
that?
no, I don't have my phone on me.
Okay. Well, if you want to go and get it and contact him and let him know, you can join anytime.
All right, sounds good, thank you.
You guys need to pull up your presentation. I'm just gonna keep. You know what, when she pulls it out, just check it a minute. They've got some people to do and some grab a little bit of time. Mrs. Brown will start. She'll speak first and let you know. Oh, I got it. I love this case.
This court is called to order and is now in session. We are gathered to hear arguments in the case of Coy versus Iowa here in the Supreme Court of the United States. You may begin.
Good morning, members of the court. My name is Maria Gomez, and my group members are Erica Alvarado and Nadia Ramirez. As representatives of Iowa in the case of Coy versus Iowa, we intend to prove that Coy's Sixth Amendment right was not violated and that the court should have upheld the ruling of the lower court.
On August 2, 1985, John Avery Coy was arrested and charged with sexually assaulting two 13-year-old girls. In 1885, the state intended to protect child victims of child abuse. There was a screen placed between the appellant and the two girls, where John Avery could only see them, but the girls had no right to see them. Coy objected the use of the screen and argued that it had violated the Sixth Amendment, which was the use of right to confront his witnesses. Majority found out that the defendant's right to face-to-face confrontation had been violated in this case. It anticipated that the child would be unable to testify. Justice Scalia continued by addressing that the state suggested that the confrontation interest was outweighed the right of confrontation. The rights which gave away to other interests are reasonably inflict rights of the Constitution clause, as the right to cross-examine or the right to exclude out of this court statement.
Our constitutional question that we're trying to prove is that, does the defendant have the right to confront his alleged victims face-to-face under the Sixth Amendment if they testify before the jury? The Sixth Amendment guarantees protection to the defendant if they are from arrest or indictment through trial. Justice Blackmun wrote that it was constitutionally upheld due to state statute, which means that the jury should not have overturned his conviction. The Confrontation Clause does not guarantee an absolute right to face-to-face meeting with a defendant by subjecting them to rigorous testing in an adversary proceeding. And it is also not an indispensable element of the confrontation right. Evidence that was found was a flashlight belonging to one of the victims was found in Coy's possession with his fingerprints on them. A cup was discovered in his back door with his urine in it. He was not identified due to the suspect wearing nylon stockings over his head, but due to the amount of evidence found on him, he was pled guilty.
Iowa Code Protection Children. Iowa Code 915.38. Televised, videotaped, and recorded evidence, eliminated court testimony minors, and others. Iowa Code 910A.30 also ensures that defendant and counsel can confer during the testimony to inform the child that the defendant can see and hear the child during the testimony. The use of such a device is limited to children under the age of 14. Related cases. Ohio versus Clerk. The preschool teacher noticed some facial injuries on a 3-year-old student. The student indicated that his mother's boyfriend, Darius Clerk, caused them. Judge ruled the 3-year-old child was incompetent to testify, but refused to exclude the child's out-of-court identification of Clark as his abuser. Clark claimed that this violated his Sixth Amendment right to confront the witness against him. Taylor versus Illinois. The compulsory process clause of the Sixth Amendment may, in an appropriate case, be violated by the imposition of a discovery sanction that entirely excluded the testimony of a sanction for violating the discovery rule. Maryland versus Craig. Several charges related to her alleged sexual abuse of a 6-year-old child. The court rejected Craig's objection that the prosecutor's use violates the confirmation clause of the Sixth Amendment, ruling that Craig retrieved the excesses of the right to confirmation. In conclusion, the use of certain protocol devices designed to protect the child witness from the trauma of testifying in court may sometimes be permissible. The right to face-to-face encounter is not absolute. There is no Supreme Court decision that directly says eyeball-to-eyeball confirmation. In some circumstances, the televised testimony is appropriate if child cannot tolerate being in the same courtroom. If the child can, then that is required. In this circumstances, it was appropriate to infringe his rights. Any questions?
Does it make a difference? How old are these girls when they testified?
13.
When they testified, they're 13?
Yeah. So that's why it was okay to use the screen, because you can do it under the age of 14.
And they were in the same room?
Yes.
The girls were in a different room than the defendant. The defendant was in the courtroom and there was a screen placed in front of him. And the girls were placed in another room, the counsel with them. And they also had a screen with them too. But they couldn't see him. It was to prevent trauma. And the defendant was only able to see him and hear him, and not the victims.
Okay, but he could still cross-examine them,
Yeah.
that all, they could not see him.
Yeah, so that's why he thought it violated his Sixth Amendment right.
Go back to the part where you guys are talking about, being able to, for him to be, his right to be able to confront
Yeah.
the children. What is confront? Is it
Like,
present?
Yeah,
Is it being able to see that person?
Yeah. So
That's what his argument was?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
That
why
he couldn't see him?
Yeah,
But they were there.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like he could see a screen of them and hear them, but they weren't present in the court. That's why it was avoiding his Sixth Amendment right. That's what his it's about.
You were talking about they were behind a screen,
Yep.
but that wasn't in the courtroom?
no, it's in the other room. The girls are in another room.
The
And
screen is a.
So, in modern parlance, they're kind of like zooming in.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So by screen, you mean like video? There's
Yeah,
no
yeah,
recording.
video
Yeah.
recording.
Okay.
It's pretty much live.
That's what I'm
Right.
trying to say for 915.38, televised, videotaped, and recorded evidence.
Okay, very good.
So can you go back to the Scalia slide? I was a little confused on what Justice Scalia said. This one. Can you explain that first bullet point that to me?
Since there's Iowa codes on protecting children, they thought that it was okay for them to, proceed with the ruling because it was still constitutionally, like, okay with them.
For the Iowa codes.
And, since, John Avery Coy was found, like, sexually assaulting 2 13-year-old girls, they feel like they shouldn't really give him, like a pass on what he did to those girls.
you go.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you. Nice job, guys.
All right, Michael, we need to unmute you. Are you there? Good deal. I'm gonna bring you up to the front of the room. Who's clicking?
I will.
Okay, you might want to give it a shot, just see how it's going for you. How about you go stand on that side? We'll have Michael or Axel on this side. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Mrs. Grubb, we'll start you in a minute.
All right, good morning. The court is now called to order and is now in session. We are gathered to hear arguments in the case of Glossop versus Gross here in the Supreme Court of the United States of America. You may begin.
Okay. Good morning, members of the court. I am Michael, and my group members are Axel, Angel, and Christian. As representatives in the case Glossop v. Gross, representing plaintiffs, we intend to prove that the drug midazolam was not a viable substitution as the first drug in the lethal injection procedure, violating the Eighth Amendment. It is our belief that the court should overturn the ruling of the lower court.
The Eighth Amendment states that excessive bail should not be required, nor excessive fines should be imposed. No parole or unusual punishment should be inflicted.
The case. Justin Sneed had beat Barry Ventries to death with a baseball bat. Sneed had said that Richard Glossop had told him to do so in exchange for money, which ended up being truthful. Richard Glossop was then put on death row where they were substituting the first drug of the 3 lethal injection midazolam procedure. Glossop and other inmates argued that a 500 milligram dose of midazolam was not enough to sedate them, which violated their Eighth Amendment protection. Clayton Lockett, another death row inmate, was supposed to be executed with lethal injection, but the midazolam did not do its job. However, he died 40 minutes after the injection, which justified the inmates' points that they had made.
Is the next slide?
Yeah.
So the constitutional question is as follows. Does Oklahoma's use of midazolam in the lethal injection procedure, the same drug used in Clayton Lockett's execution, violate the Eighth Amendment? Well, that's what we intend to prove, so let's get rolling.
Our first court case to support us is Warner v. Gross. Charles Warner was the next inmate to get executed after Clayton Lockett, but Charles Warner had seen how well the execution for Clayton Lockett went, so him and many other inmates filed a 42 U.S.C., a 42 U.S.C. complaint against the state officials saying that midazolam violated their Eighth Amendment protection. Midazolam works to render people unconscious and not as an anesthetic. Noxious chemicals wake up the body, and because of this, they decided to crank up the dosage, but there's a problem with that. The dosage of the drug gets to a point where it hits a ceiling and its effectiveness does not work after that, no matter how high you crank it.
What is midazolam? Midazolam is a drug that can render someone unconscious, and it is not anesthetic. The FDA says that midazolam should not be used as the sole anesthetic. There are no pharmacological equivalent between the thiopane, which is our original drug, and midazolam, so therefore they're not interchangeable. In case to clearance, listen and flora, to listen to the and flora, which uses a 3-drug combination for execution. He claimed that the formal lethal injection was unnecessarily painful and therefore violated the 8th Amendment.
Goes to the next slide.
Yeah, I understand.
Our final case, Chavez v. Florida, shows another case where the plaintiff said that the use of midazolam was unconstitutional. Juan Chavez was scheduled for execution on February 14, 2014. He filed a 42 U.S.C. 1983 lawsuit against the district court regarding the use of midazolam in his execution. He stated that it would be unconstitutional due to it not subduing the other effect of the 2 other drugs, which would include asphyxiation and searing pain. Dr. Lubarsky backed up his claim, saying that the midazolam is not typically used in the clinical setting and is not approved by the FDA as a sedative. Chavez also pointed to 3 recent executions with midazolam, saying that they all each had showed varying degrees of movement after administration. The court ruled unanimously against Chavez due to his failure to provide a readily available alternative. It does bring more evidence that midazolam was not the drug to use as the anesthetic, though. So, does midazolam violate the 8th Amendment? Is the use of midazolam in the lethal injection procedure unconstitutional? Yes. Midazolam being used as the sole anesthetic in the 3-drug lethal injection procedure has not only proven to be ineffective, but unconstitutional as well, violating the 8th Amendment's protection against cruel and unusual punishment. We hope that an alternative could be found, such as ketamine, a drug that actually induces and maintains a state of anesthesia. We thank you for listening. If you have any questions, which you definitely will, we'll try and answer them to the best of our ability.
What is the argument against this? Why do they keep using it? Does the state say?
They did not have access to the other drug at the time, the sodium thiopental, and the midazolam was all they could have used, I guess. I don't know why they didn't try and find another alternative, but that's what they came up with.
So in the prior case, I guess your recent or past cases, the reason that was midazolam was used was because there wasn't an alternative, or there wasn't an alternative given to the cases in the past. Is that correct? Is that what you stated earlier, or
Yes.
mine?
Yes, it is.
Also along with that, I had read in an article by The Atlantic that most times the person that was injecting the inmate wasn't even certified to give lethal injection, and it'd just be like an officer from the jail. And that most times jails would just refuse to find an alternative for a drug of midazolam.
So in this case, you're recommending to use an alternative.
Yes.
And that alternative, what kind of supporting facts do you have about using that?
Well, it would not, it would put you under, like the midazolam, and since they did not have access to the sodium thiopental or any of the other things, I figured that ketamine would probably be the next best alternative. I think it does have like restrictions placed on it due to like its history with it being abused as a drug. But since it's like the district court or whatever, I think it would be fine for them to use. Like the worst side effects, I think, would just really be hallucinations and stuff like that. Probably should have digged a little deeper, but that's what I can tell you about it.
You just said a certain drug wasn't available, sodium pental.
Yeah, sodium thiopental, which would have put
Why
them
wasn't
under,
that
but they
available?
didn't have access to it at the time.
Why wouldn't they have had access to it?
I think there was like kind of a shortage of it, like with the demanding rise of the lethal injection procedure being used all throughout the country. And Oklahoma was just unlucky, so they had to go with the next best thing.
I feel like there should be, I mean, aren't lethal injections scheduled pretty far in advance? I feel like there should be maybe some kind of other protocol other than just throwing whatever drug in them, but
Yeah.
they only have the two choices, they don't have any more? Can they go to a local
Not
hospital?
that I read, no.
Actually, in that question also, also read in that same article that other states were actually buying drugs from overseas, from doctors that had produced the drugs in like their garage or their store where they're located.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah. Nice job.
Good job.
Thank you.
Next time we're in the restroom. Where's the nearest one now? Down that main
Up the
hallway
hall
by.
to the left.
I
Just looked it up, Pfizer at some point blocked drug use for lethal injections. And they said, we're not selling this stuff to you for this purpose anymore. I don't know if that's what they're talking about. Hey.
Interesting
They
case.
said she's ready.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Michael, you are good.
Great, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome to leave.
Looking fresh, Michael.
No.
You didn't get to hear me speak.
Oh, man. Are you quicker?
Leah.
Yeah, give me that thing. I gotta make sure this thing is good.
Jade, you've got a new wall.
Yes, I decided to be more.
This is your Supreme Court wall?
Yes, I'm in court.
Okay, so make sure that works.
So, it's gonna be a minute. Our Chief Justice is taking a break.
Oh,
And
wow.
so you guys are just all gonna hang out a minute.
Am I allowed to follow along on the keynote on my computer?
I don't see that that's a problem.
Jay, we know you're not cheating.
No, never.
The other center's done? Mr. Olson?
Yes, they are.
If I could just read off something, it would make me feel like 1,000 times better.
You have
Not,
it?
yeah, I do have it.
Yep.
Oh, anyways, we have two justices gone.
Yeah, Ron snuck out.
Yeah.
Bathroom break?
Yeah.
Oh, I just need to stand. Long morning. Actually, it's gone very well though.
Really? The Zooms too?
Even in spite of the Zooms, it's gone quite well.
What if Jay can't, like, she said yesterday she had some problems with hearing.
You know, all I can say is this morning, everything has gone smoothly.
Okay.
Hopefully that
So
doesn't
it does.
change.
It'll be like that for us too.
It's going to be.
That's right.
And you know what? If you have to say, wait, is it me? It's not the end of the world. We understand the difficulty of the whole Zoom thing. We picked up several seniors today with continuous learning.
Just today, I was thinking there are quite a few.
How many are there? I didn't know that. Jay.
We picked up sophomores on continuous learning too.
Hi, sorry about that.
That's okay.
I had to feel the focus.
Solid.
Yep.
Oh, Mrs. Brown will start.
Do we have a Zoomer too? Okay. There's Jade, okay. attention. We are gathered to hear arguments in the case of Carpenter versus U.S. here in the Supreme Court of the United States of America. You may begin.
Good morning, members of the court. My name is Leah Rosebone.
I am Marco Lopez.
And I am Jade Nelson.
In the case Carpenter versus U.S., we are the petitioner side, Carpenter, because his Fourth Amendment rights were violated when the police obtained his cell site location information without a warrant.
Does obtaining cell site location information without a warrant violate the Fourth Amendment? Yes. The Fourth Amendment states that we the people have the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures without a warrant. We believe that we should recognize the shift that the technological development of the 21st century has brought upon us, and that we should expand our vision on how this type of data is viewed under the Fourth Amendment.
A search warrant is a court order given by the judge giving the officer permission to look through things normally protected by the Fourth Amendment. This includes houses, papers, persons, and in our case, location.
A court order of disclosure provides a means of gathering information in an investigation.
In this case, reasonable expectation of privacy and third party work hand in hand. Reasonable expectation of privacy is a part of the Fourth Amendment that law enforcement uses to help know what is legal and illegal of obtaining a warrant. Reasonable expectation of privacy states that if the information is meant to be kept private by the owner, and is meant to be kept private by society, then it should be covered under the reasonable expectation of privacy. The only exception to this is if you voluntarily give your information to a third party, then the information is no longer covered under the reasonable expectation of privacy and it does not require a warrant to obtain it.
In April of 2011, several robberies occurred around the Detroit area. One of the men was caught and gave up the other's information to the FBI. The FBI took this information and took it to his cell company so they could find their locations. Carpenter, one of the men involved, was unknowingly being trapped for 127 days. The FBI found that he was only 2 miles away from 4 of the robberies, resulting in Carpenter getting charged and arrested. This goes against the Fourth Amendment because the FBI did not obtain a search warrant before searching for the cell site location information. The court argues that a court order of disclosure gives the FBI the permission to search for the cell site location information. We argue that this goes against the Fourth Amendment because the FBI should have gotten a search warrant before searching for the cell site location information.
The case of Smith versus Maryland shows that when information is not voluntarily given to a third party, then it is covered underneath the Fourth Amendment. In this case, Smith was tied to crimes using a pen register or a device recording what number Smith called without a warrant. The court argued that Smith voluntarily gave this information to a third party, but in reality, he didn't. Justice Thurgood Marshall argued that Smith had no other choice in giving the numbers he called to the cell phone company. And in conclusion, therefore, if there is no alternative to giving information to a third party, there is protection underneath the Fourth Amendment. The police should have gotten a warrant to obtain this information from Smith. And just like Smith, Carpenter had no other alternative in giving his information to a third party, so therefore the police should have obtained a warrant for his case too.
In U.S. versus Jones, the car of Antoine Jones was tracked via a GPS attached to it by the police in suspicion of drug trafficking for close to a month. Jones won the case based on the grounds that the police had not obtained a warrant before attaching the GPS to his vehicle. Just much like GPS tracking of a vehicle, cell site location information is detailed and effortlessly compiled. Historical cell site records present even greater privacy concerns than that of the GPS tracking of a vehicle. Our cell phones have become a part of us and contain so much information about us, like health records, bank account information, and even our locations. Tracking someone's cell phone tracks the exact movements of the user, so individuals have a reasonable expectation of privacy in the whole of their physical movements.
Smith versus Maryland proves that location is protected through a third party under reasonable expectation of privacy. United States versus Jones proves that privacy of cell records, including location, is protected under the Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated according to the Fourth Amendment. The FBI violated this right when they tracked Carpenter's location and did not get a warrant first. This in turn proves that any information obtained by the FBI carpenter would not and should not be viable in a court of law. Thank you for your time.
So, probable cause. Was there probable cause for them?
In Carpenter versus US.
Well,
Because the law enforcement, they have to have probable cause to do anything. And if they find something when they do it, then you go in and search the rest. Was there a reason they did what they did?
they suspected them of being involved in the robberies, but
So you feel that there was probable cause, and there was probable cause for investigation, but what they failed to do is get the warrant to
Yeah.
look at the records.
Yeah.
And that are protected under the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah.
As this information from the cell phone is protected under the Fourth Amendment. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, that's exactly right.
And was the information brought from that pinning of the phone or whatever to court and admitted as evidence
Yes, it was.
without a search warrant?
Yes.
So who owns that data? Is it Carpenter's data or is it someone else's data?
It's,
we believe it's Carpenter's data.
we believe it's Carpenter's data. Even
Even if he unknowingly gives it to the cell phone companies, it's still
his location.
his location and all his cell phone information.
But the court is only going to care who owns it. So does
Yeah.
Verizon, does AT&T own it?
We believe that Carpenter owns it. Carpenter owns it and they're just in hold of it, I would say. The cell phone companies are in hold of it
Yeah.
for, I don't know how long they keep it for, but they're in hold of it. I don't know what they keep it for.
So why didn't they get a warrant? Why didn't the police just get a warrant for this data rather than just gathering information then using it? Why not the warrant first?
What,
They believed that, because it was a third party, it was through a third party, that, Carpenter voluntarily gave this information away.
So a search
So,
warrant.
a search warrant is not viable, you don't need one. If it's information voluntarily given to a third party, you don't need a warrant at all. But we're arguing that the warrant was needed because the information was not voluntarily given.
forgive me if this was said already, but how was he found to be a suspect? Just by the cell phone?
One of the accomplices gave up cell phones,
Cell phone numbers,
cell
wasn't
phone
it?
numbers and gave them to the
Cell phone
FBI.
numbers.
We
Okay.
explained that in the facts of the case.
I feel like deja vu.
Yes, I've had this happen before, but
I was
yes.
like, what did I lose my mind? Again, anyway, so, okay, because my next question would be, did the FBI use a cell phone tower, or did they use the cell phone?
They didn't use a cell phone number, they used his location through the towers, so it'd be
Cell
different.
site location.
But they used it through the number.
But they found the number through search of the cell tower.
They found the
Near that
number,
location, right?
The number was given.
yeah, the
by
number was given by the accomplices.
informants.
No other questions?
No, good, thank you.
Always very good.
Good job, guys.
Got you. Killed it. Do we just like,
Yeah.
do we just leave?
Read it,
Yeah.
Jake.
Just leave Jake.
Bye, Jake.
Bye.
You guys have a good day.
You guys are done.
Yeah.
Jacob, you're welcome to sign out